In the dead of night, when the world hushes to a whisper and shadows stretch like fingers clawing at the edges of reality, have you ever felt that icy prickle on your skin, the unmistakable sense that you're not alone, that something ancient and unseen is watching, waiting to reveal a terror so profound it echoes through millennia? Buckle up, because tonight we're diving into the abyss of history's very first recorded ghost story, a chilling tale from ancient times that's too scary to forget, one that birthed every haunted house yarn you've ever heard, from creaking floors to spectral chains, and it all begins not in some fog-shrouded Victorian mansion, but in the sun-baked streets of Athens over 2,000 years ago, where philosophy and the supernatural collided in a nightmare that still sends shivers down spines today. Picture this. The year is around 100 AD, the Roman Empire sprawls like a colossal beast across the Mediterranean, its heart pulsing in Rome, but its tendrils reaching into Greece, where the ghosts of gods and heroes linger in marble ruins and olive groves. Pliny the Younger, a sharp-witted Roman lawyer and author, nephew to the famed Pliny the Elder who perished in the cataclysmic eruption of Vesuvius that buried Pompeii in ash, sits by lamplight in his villa, quill-scratching parchment as he pens letters that will outlive empires, and in one fateful epistle, he unleashes upon the world the inaugural ghost story, a narrative so vivid and unsettling that it feels ripped from the pages of a modern horror thriller, yet it's rooted in the real fears of an era when people believed the veil between life and death was as thin as a spider's web. Pliny, ever the rationalist in an age of auguries and omens, recounts this tale not as mere folklore, but as a sober testimony from witnesses, a story whispered among the elite, passed from philosophers to poets, and now immortalized in his words. It's the account of a haunted house in Athens, a city where Socrates once pondered the soul's immortality under the Acropolis's watchful gaze, but where, in this shadowed corner, the soul refuses to rest. Athens, the cradle of democracy and drama, buzzes with life. Merchants hawk spices from distant lands in the agora, slaves hurry with amphorae of wine, philosophers debate in colonnaded stoas under a sky painted azure by the gods, but amid this vibrant tapestry lurks a forsaken abode, a sprawling villa on the outskirts, its once grand facade crumbling like forgotten dreams, vines strangling columns that echo with the ghosts of symposia long silenced. Whispers spread like wildfire through the city's taverns and baths. No one dares rent this cursed place, for at night, when the moon casts silvery spells over the rooftops, eerie sounds erupt from within, the metallic clank of chains dragging across stone floors, growing louder, insistent, as if some tormented prisoner strains against invisible bonds, and then, in the witching hour, a figure materializes, an old man, gaunt and spectral, his beard matted and wild, his wrists and ankles shackled in rusted irons that rattle with every shuffling step, his eyes hollow pits of despair, beckoning silently before vanishing into the ether, leaving only the chill of the grave in his wake. Locals cross themselves, or whatever pagan equivalent they muster, averting eyes from the accursed threshold, tales multiplying of brave souls who ventured inside only to flee screaming, their hair turned white overnight, babbling of apparitions that clawed at their sanity. The rent plummets to a pittance, a lure for the desperate or the foolhardy, yet the house stands empty, a monument to terror in a city that prides itself on reason. Enter Athenodorus, a Stoic philosopher from Tarsus, the same birthplace as the Apostle Paul, a man steeped in the teachings of Zeno and Epictetus, who views the world through the lens of logic, dismissing superstitions as shadows cast by ignorant minds. He's arrived in Athens to study in its hallowed libraries, poring over scrolls of Plato and Aristotle by day, seeking wisdom in the eternal forms, but funds run low, as they do for wandering scholars, and when he hears of this bargain basement villa, his curiosity peaks, not fear, mind you, but a rational intrigue, for what better way to debunk folly than to confront it head-on? He inquires at the real estate agent's stall in the marketplace, a shady character with a toothy grin who warns him thrice, "The house is cheap for a reason, sir, the nights are long and loud there." But Athenodorus waves it off with a chuckle, signing the lease with a flourish, his mind already plotting experiments in empiricism. Perhaps the chains are wind through cracks, the figure a trick of moonlight on dust motes. As dusk falls that first evening, painting the sky in hues of crimson and indigo, he moves in with sparse belongings, a cot, a lamp, a stack of parchments, and an inkwell, setting up in the grand hall where marble floors gleam coldly underfoot, echoes amplifying every footfall like judgments from Hades. The city quiets outside, the distant hum of cicadas a lullaby to the uninitiated, but Athenodorus lights his oil lamp, its flame dancing shadows on frescoed walls depicting mythic battles, Achilles dragging Hector, perhaps a foreshadowing of his own drag into the unknown, and he begins to write, scribbling treatises on virtue and the soul, determined to ignore any nocturnal nonsense. Hours tick by, measured by the slow burn of the wick. Midnight approaches, the witching hour when the barriers between worlds thin, and at first, nothing, blissful silence, save the scratch of quill on papyrus. Then, faintly, from the bowels of the house, a sound, clink, clink, like distant blacksmith hammers, growing nearer, insistent, the rattle of chains slithering up stairwells, through corridors, a symphony of dread that builds like a storm. Athenodorus pauses, quill hovering, heart quickening despite his stoic resolve. Rationalize it, he thinks, perhaps rats dragging debris, or echoes from a neighbor's forge, but the noise swells, unmistakable now, chains dragging, scraping, a laborious advance that speaks of eternal toil, and the temperature plummets, breath fogging in the lamplight as if winter's grip has seized the summer air. He forces his gaze back to the parchment, writing furiously, feigning absorption, but the clamor peaks just beyond the room's threshold, and then, silence, a pregnant void that screams louder than any din. Slowly, deliberately, Athenodorus lifts his eyes, and there it stands, the apparition, an elderly man, emaciated, skin like parchment stretched over bones, beard unkempt and gray as storm clouds, eyes sunken into abyssal sockets that seem to swallow light, wrists and ankles bound in iron. Fetters that dangle limply now, no longer rattling, his form translucent yet solid enough to cast a faint shadow in the flickering flame. The ghost says nothing, its presence a weight on the soul, but it beckons with a skeletal finger, gesturing toward the garden beyond the hall's archway, a plea etched in its hollow gaze. Follow me, it implores without words, unravel my torment. Athenodorus, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill, nods calmly, or so he tells himself, rising with measured steps, lamp in hand, the flame trembling as if in fear. He follows the specter through moonlit corridors, past dusty atriums where fountains long dry whisper of lost opulence, the ghost gliding ahead, chains silent now, its form flickering like a candle in wind. Out into the courtyard they venture, under a canopy of stars that wink like indifferent gods, olive trees rustling in a breeze that carries the scent of earth and decay. The ghost halts at a nondescript patch of ground, overgrown with weeds, and points downward, its finger insistent, before dissolving into mist, leaving Athenodorus alone with the night and a pounding heart. Dawn breaks soon after, gilding the Acropolis in gold, and the philosopher, undeterred by the unearthly encounter, summons laborers with shovels and picks, directing them to dig where the ghost had indicated. Curious onlookers gather, whispers of madness circulating. But as the earth yields, layer by layer, a gruesome discovery emerges. Bones, human remains, tangled in rusted chains, the skeleton of an old man. Wrists and ankles scarred by irons, clearly murdered and buried in secret, denied proper rites, his spirit trapped in limbo. The workers recoil, but Athenodorus insists on a dignified burial. Funeral pyre crackling under the sun, ashes interred with honors, libations poured to appease the shades, and from that day forth, the house falls silent, chains no more, the ghost at peace, the villa reclaimed by the living. Pliny recounts this with a mix of awe and skepticism, pondering the nature of the afterlife in an empire where emperors deify themselves and oracles divine fates from entrails. Was it a hallucination born of expectation, or a genuine rift in reality? The story spreads like plague through Roman salons, inspiring poets like Virgil's shades in the Aeneid, influencing early Christian views on purgatory, and laying the blueprint for millennia of ghost lore, from medieval castle hauntings to Gothic novels by Shelley and Poe, right up to modern blockbusters where chainsaws replace chains but the terror remains the same. Yet, delve deeper, and the historical layers unfold. Athens under Roman rule, a melting pot of Greek rationalism and Eastern mysticism, where Epicureans denied the soul's survival while Stoics like Athenodorus pondered its endurance. Pliny himself, survivor of Vesuvius's wrath, knew the fragility of life, his uncle's death amid pyroclastic flows a real horror that perhaps primed him for tales of the undead. Imagine the societal undercurrents, slavery rampant, murders common in the shadows of power, bodies disposed without ceremony, spirits believed to wander if unburied, as in Homer's Odyssey where Patroclus begs Achilles for rights. Athenodorus, possibly a real figure mentioned in other texts, embodies the enlightened mind confronting the irrational, a theme echoing through history, Galileo's telescope piercing heavenly illusions, Darwin unraveling creation myths, yet ghosts persist, defying science. Suspense builds in retellings. What if the ghost had spoken, revealing its killer? A jealous heir, perhaps, or a rival philosopher poisoning the well of ideas? The chains symbolize bondage beyond death, a metaphor for unresolved guilt, societal chains binding the oppressed. As nights lengthen in our tale, envision extensions, Athenodorus, post-encounter, delving into occult scrolls, questioning if more spirits lurk in Athens' ruins, perhaps encountering echoes of Trojan War dead or oracle priestesses whispering prophecies. Historical depth enriches. Pliny's letters, preserved through medieval monks, influence Renaissance humanists like Erasmus, who ponder the soul's immortality amid plagues that mirror ghostly visitations. Fast forward, Victorian seances invoke similar chained spirits, spiritualism booming post-Civil War, grief birthing ghost photography hoaxes. Today, in YouTube's digital haunts, creators recreate Pliny's tale with CGI specters, but the core chill remains, that beckoning finger, the unearthed bones, a resolution that satisfies yet lingers. Expand the narrative. Before Athenodorus, imagine prior tenants, a young poet fleeing at the first rattle, a merchant counting coins only to drop them as the ghost materializes, a family shattered by nightly terrors. Describe the house vividly, mosaics depicting underworld scenes, Persephone's abduction foreshadowing the ghost's plight, creaking doors, drafts whispering names. Build suspense, Athenodorus alone, lamp guttering, chains approaching, slowly, each clink a heartbeat skipped, the air thickening with dread. The reveal, bones gleaming white in torchlight, chains corroded but intact, a skull grinning eternally. Aftermath, peace descends, but Athenodorus changed, his philosophies infused with the supernatural, lecturing on the soul's unrest. Pliny, receiving the tale from friends, debates its veracity over wine, the eruption's trauma coloring his credulity. This story, too scary to forget, warns, ignore the past at your peril, unresolved wrongs chain us all. As empires fall, Rome to barbarians, Byzantium to Ottomans, the tale endures, translated, adapted, a spectral thread through time. In dark theaters of the mind, it plays on. What if tonight, in your home, chains rattle? Would you follow? The end, yet the terror lingers, eternal as the grave.